much, Stephen. Thank you to AGSIW for hosting me and us today. So the genesis of this paper was really a frustration in many ways with two things. First, the narratives, the stories that were forming around what the Yemen war was, what the civil war was and what it looked like and what the solutions were to it on the one hand. And on the second hand, the approaches being taken to mediating and moving towards a peace deal for Yemen. And in trying to work through the narratives that were emerging around the war, what we decided to do was really take a fresh approach, a blank slate, if you like, and try and build a picture of the conflict from the ground up rather than from the top down, which we'll come back to in a little bit. That's really sort of where my recommendations lie in terms of attempting to broker some sort of peace in Yemen. The other question that we were asking of ourselves as we went into this project is, what's the best way to take this information that we're going to build over the coming year and put it into something that's going to be a useful tool for the casual observer, for the informed observer, and also for policymakers at large who generally don't have the time required to read one of my 20,000-word reports. Most people don't make it all the way through the 50 pages. So the question was, how do we tell a convincing and compelling story that is based on really, really granular, detailed research on what's happening on the ground across the country, while at the same time presenting it in a way that the average person and policymakers can understand, which is why, if I get this right, we've built this map, which I'll be referring to throughout today. So what we've done, and you can access this freely online, is we built this interactive map of what we describe as Yemen's chaos state. And I'll come back to what I mean by that in just a little minute. But basically, the story that we've been told since the beginning of the conflict is something quite binary, something quite two-sided, which is simply that here in the northwest and highland of Yemen, there has been until December of last year, and again, this is something I have to come back to, this alliance between the Houthis, a Zaidi Shia religious movement that became basically a military organization over the course of the past 14 years, and allies of former President Ali Abdullah Saleh. And on the other side, over here, with these guys here being backed by Iran, and then on the other side, we have a coalition of Yemeni forces under the umbrella of Yemen's president, Abdurrahman Mansour Hadi, backed by Saudi Arabia, and a broader coalition, the most important member beyond the Saudis, of which is the UAE. And this is the simple top-line version of the story. They're fighting each other. The coalition wants to reinstate Hadi as president in Sana'a, push out the Houthi-Saleh alliance, and restore order to the country. Now, the issue with this story is that from the beginning of the conflict, people actually looking at what's happening on the ground, who's fighting who, found that there were a lot of opaque answers. There have been a lot of references since the beginning of the conflict to the National Army of Yemen, a concept which was pretty shaky before the civil war and is even shakier now. And what we really found was that Yemen, I mean, before the conflict in real terms, but since the conflict begun, has really been divided into multiple zones of influence, of control, and of power, with different external sponsors, external allies, and internal allies that don't particularly map with this big top-line story. And in particular, what we discovered is that within the areas that are described as under the control of the government of Yemen, so these areas here, Marib, what we're calling the Tribal South, Aden, all the way out through Hadramaut and Mahra, this is presented as one contiguous zone controlled by a single government, whereas in fact, many different groups control different areas on the ground and do have different agendas and aren't necessarily the best of friends, to put it mildly. And on top of this, the external agendas of those sponsoring the anti-Houthi war effort are not particularly aligned. And one of the biggest issues has been the issue of Islah, a Sunni Islamist party in Yemen, which is described quite erroneously, in fact, as Yemen's Muslim Brotherhood. And again, I'm going to come back to that. So what I'm going to try and do is make this at one and the same time more complex without making it so complex that you can't follow my train of thought. I'll give it a shot.
Who's this?